Yep.
Yeah, let's go.
I heard the noise. So Michael, you and I were just talking about, we were relating to each other about, our respective alliances to our teams, right? You being a Giants fan, me being an Eagles fan. Typically, those two are rivals. But today, we're not on the wetlands and you're not at the link. So here we are, right? And you were talking about a particular moment in the last game when my Eagles completely wiped the floor with the Giants, where Saquon and Coach Sirianni are sitting on the bench together. And Saquon's about to, hit yet another milestone, break another record. I think he was only 13 yards away. And Coach Sirianni sits next to him, and the audio's out there for anybody who hasn't seen this yet, and video. Hey, you're about to hit this milestone. I'm happy to put you in to do it. I'm going to take all the starters out if, the Giants don't score on this drive. But we can still hit this milestone. And Saquon looks him in the eye and goes, no, let the young guys eat. No, if you want this, Sirianni says, you can do it. He reassures him. And he says, I would rather watch the young guys eat. This is so relatable to business, which in my opinion is one of the best team sports next to being in a band, but not everybody can play an instrument, right? Everybody can do business. And what I thought about that interaction was relating to, say, a director and one of his managers. And the director's talking to the manager, and he's like, and the manager and the director's like, the manager's like, look, I really need you to be at this conference with me. So-and-so is going to be there, and so-and-so is going to be there, and so-and-so is going to be there. And if we get those guys, it changes everything for our budget this coming year and all that. And you've been with this person for the past 4 or 5 years. You cut your teeth together. You mentored this person. You supported them and so on. And you look them in the eye and you say, no, you got this. I want to see you go win. I completely trust you. Go get them.
And are promoting your self-growth as well to go into a situation where you may not have the opportunity prior and have the opportunity to go and shine. And I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot of business relatable things with that Saquon story that you just broke down. Something that the listeners didn't hear before we hit record was before the game when the Eagles were pulling into MetLife, Giants fans are literally burning Saquon's Giants jersey in front of the bus. So that does a few things, right? And that's triggering a few elements in Saquon's mind. First of all, he spent this first 7 seasons in New York. Mm-hmm. He said he wanted to be a Giant his whole life. Obviously, as we all know, football fans especially, it didn't work out. The deal didn't go through, and he ended up in Philadelphia, unfortunately, in the same division. Okay, fine. So he goes into New York, his first return back. He torches the Giants, like embarrasses them. The Giants even score a touchdown, right? And so he's approaching this personal record, and the hate that he received in his initial homecoming would probably put anyone else in those shoes. Having that conversation with Sirianni on the sidelines, it's like, yeah, I want to take it to these guys without question. Like, F them. I'm gonna embarrass them more than he already did. But it's a really, really tremendous sign of leadership, to your point, which will translate well into our actual business conversation here in a second.
Yeah.
I don't need to stick it to these guys. I've done my job and more. I would rather see the young guys eat. Get the 3rd and 4th string guys in there. Get them some touches on the ball. Let's see what they can do, because they may be the next Saquon, but we may just not know it yet. Not everyone is Saquon coming out of Penn State.
Right.
Tom Brady wasn't Tom Brady until, years on the Patriots. He wasn't Saquon coming out of Michigan. We had no idea who he was going to be. Maybe that guy is sitting on the bench next to Saquon. That moment may be defining for somebody further on down the road. It's really a great starting point for this conversation, because a lot of people may see that video at face value. Oh, Saquon, good teammate, but there's a lot more going on there.
Agreed. The leadership in a atmosphere like that has, I think, a different shape, a different face. I mean, these guys are going to physical warfare, right?
Literally.
And you know, I'm not some crazy, big jock guy. Obviously, there's guitars behind me. I don't want to keep pointing that out, but I played baseball, then I switched over to playing jazz and rock and roll because I was better at that. and I could be a leader on that team, right? Like nobody, I'm not Brian Dawkins. I'm not going to be the team captain, safety, the guy that you trust back there to make sure that nothing's getting in the end zone. Like, but I am the guy that you can trust, that's going to show up on time, that's going to motivate you, that's always going to have your back, that's going to be the loyalist friend you've ever had in your life. I can go on the road with you, and I know that we're going to be successful. That kind of team member, right? And I think that what Saquon displayed there for his new team, not that these guys already didn't know each other, they're playing each other twice a year, right? Most of them absolutely are either going to the pub or having a meal after this game, after they're, punching each other.
Right.
And, but the leadership that I saw at that moment, I ordered the jersey that night. Like, Kelly Green, done deal. That kind of just adding it to the repertoire of other Eagles jerseys. But regardless, as a fan, especially a Philly fan, there's a particular fire that you look in these players, there's a particular passion that you look for. Well, for me in business, as a leader, as someone who needs to have purpose in what they do in order to get up in the morning, that's also what I look for in who leads me. And also the fire and stuff that I try and bring to the table to motivate the people that work for me.
Well, not to mention the environment. I mean, I feel like if they were in Cincinnati, for example, maybe a little less significance, but given the stakes and the background story, where he was and the attitude and approach to overcoming that initial adversity and honestly just pure hate from where it all began.
And injury. Let's not forget, like 2 years of just on and off the field, mostly off the field.
Shredded ACLs. Yeah. No, and for him to have the opportunity to like I said, stick it back to them and say, no, like that's not who I am.
Yeah.
Let the young kids. I mean, it's really tremendous. And a similar story for me, and then we can move on. But back in my first corporate job, I was about to win the biggest deal of my life at that point. And we needed to get VP approval for specific pricing. It was like 50,000 units or something like that. Unheard of quantity in this specific account. And my field rep at the time, by the way, this VP, no one gets to email him. No one gets to ping him. He's talking directly to the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. Like I certainly don't get to reach out and touch base with him.
Got it. His face on LinkedIn is the question mark.
Exactly. Yeah, he's the one who you have to type in his email to even get to add him in the first place, right?
He must be very special. Congratulations to him.
Very special.
To give him access or talk to him. Good job, guy.
Yeah. So instead of my field rep sending the email, telling him this is what's happening, this is the value of the deal, this is the significance, he said, you know what, I want you to write the email because I want him to see that it's coming from you and get the visibility. And it's not that big of a deal, but I still remember it like 6 years later, and whoever got to touch the ball because Saquon said, I'm good. I don't know what the result was, obviously, but it's kind of the same concept, like giving those beneath you, whether you're on a football field or in the corporate world or anything and anywhere in between, getting the opportunity to go and shine when you usually wouldn't be able to. Memorable, man. Like I said, this happened 6 years ago, not that big of a deal. Still remember it, and obviously applicable to this conversation.
It is a big deal because I think when I heard the beginning of that story, I didn't think it was going to end that way. I was already being an obnoxious asshole in the sense that I'm like, oh, big corporate guy up top, clapping for him. Nobody can reach him. Nobody knows who he is. Well, then, however, shame on me because sounds like that guy invested or woman invested a lot in you, believed in you, trusted you, and was like, "Let LFG go get him."
And I say it's not a big deal because it was literally just me sending an email that we wrote together. But at the end of the day, it was coming from me, and it's like a huge, high stakes email. It's a high stakes situation, unheard of quantity, an account that we've never gotten into before. And now I have a relationship with the guy that kind of started everything. And I still talk to him to this day, even though I, of course, no longer work there. But yeah, big wig. And it's like little things like that. Maybe it means nothing to them, but to me, it was huge. So
let me ask you a question. Did you win?
We did. I still have the email in my personal email. I forwarded it to myself because I look at it every once in a while. It was by far the biggest work at the time. That was the biggest deal I'd ever closed in my career. And I was just a kid. I was like 23. So big deal for me. I still have the win notice, if you will.
Good. Those moments will help you. You'll find 6 years ago, 23. So that means you're just about to be 30, if not 30 already. So those moments will help you. Those great moments you had, that feeling of jubilee and joy. That's something that you're going to chase, right? That's like a dragon you're always going to chase. You're always going to chase that feeling because, you got that feeling from results, hence your podcast. And I think that sometimes when you can channel what you did in a different situation, when you weren't a certain stature, a certain rank, things like that, and how you won previously, it's really never any fucking different as you get older and deal with more complex deals. They're actually just as simple, just sometimes with complexities in there. But at the end of the day, it's still sales.
Yeah,
right?
You just grow up a little bit, right?
Exactly.
It's still just as simple. It's just not as monumental because it's not your first time anymore.
Right. And everybody that you're talking to on a Zoom or in person, if you like to use the power of presence, which I do, they all have heartbeats, right? Even if some of them don't seem like they do in the beginning, you just got to figure out what makes that heartbeat, right?
Sure.
In order to be relatable. And the easiest way to do that is to just be yourself. To be honest with you, a lot of people, they think that business is a certain persona, right? The definition of business doesn't tell me anything about a persona. Like there's no persona in there. Plenty of actionable things, but it doesn't, like, it's not one thing. It's quite adaptable, right? And humans are quite adaptable to give each other proper and helpful solutions. So,
well, and I think there's to your point, there's a lot of different, there's not one personality type that's specifically good at like sales or marketing or finance or HR. How many times have you been to a sales conference and you meet 20 different types of people who are all respectively good at their jobs?
oh, dude, yeah. Especially like when I was in the mobility industry in the early 2000s, like really early 2000s. I think I've already dated myself a couple times on this show, but in any case, like that was where I got my first taste of running into a bunch of people that do the exact same thing I do and being humble, because I thought I was just like doing these huge numbers, out of a, big ticket city. And, I had a really, really great guy that I worked for and a guy that mentored me that was famous in that world. And, just thought I had it all. And I started rubbing shoulders with these guys and I'm like, wow, this guy's out hustling me. This guy can do this better. This guy can do that better. This guy's got all the contacts that I want. What am I doing differently? And what I realized was I grew up in such a fast-paced environment in a house filled with salespeople. My father was in sales. My mother was in sales after she was a Philadelphia Eagles cheerleader.
Right.
I showed up, no more cheerleading. I realized that all that fast paced stuff it gave me something, right? It gave me the energy. Obviously the talent was there because I had already absorbed that from my parents and had been working since I was 11. No, that's not a joke. I had a paper route and so on. And they really kind of taught me work ethic early on. Or maybe they already knew I was going to drop out of high school. I don't know. But yeah, so being able to kind of absorb that. But one thing, what don't you do when you're a kid that often?
Right. The world's your oyster. You can kind of do whatever you want at that point. When you're 11.
But also, what don't you do? What don't you do when you're a kid that age and then going into your teens?
I mean, have a job, I would imagine. I'm
not. Listen.
And listen. Yeah.
You don't listen, right?
Well, so yeah, I definitely didn't.
I didn't. I mean, I was getting in trouble like it was my job. If I had a job, it was getting in trouble.
It was getting, yelled at by my mom. Yeah, me too, man. Me too, all the way through college and still to this day sometimes. A little better these days, but depends on what's going on.
But, I realized that listening was just as powerful as speaking. And I spent that entire conference listening. And then I went home and, applied some things that I'd learned from these guys, and my trajectory was basically leading me into my first business, and then, fun stuff from there.
It's a good point, because I think it's something that's slept on a lot, especially with the newer generation. Listening is now, it's so slept on. It's almost like a skill in itself. It's like, it sounds so simple, but can you actually listen? Can you do deep listening and stop talking for a second and do 90% of the listening instead? I guarantee you're going to learn a lot more, especially when you're surrounding yourself by people who know a lot more than you and who have a hell of a lot more experience than you. Like when you went to that conference and it's like, that guy's been winning. I've closed one big deal. I'm super pumped about it. That guy's closed 100 like that this year. And this guy's out hustling me. This guy's out earning me. It's like, no, I'm not the sharpest or best salesman in the room right now, but I'm in the right environment to eventually get to that point. I'm surrounding myself and rubbing shoulders with people who are that good, but also I need to listen and not just talk, and listen and hear what they have to say, because there's so much value. It's like the same thing with data these days. There's so much information and insights in like company data, and companies aren't able to harness it because they don't. I mean, now with AI and everything, we're getting to that point.
Yeah.
A subject for later, of course. Don't want to get too off topic, but it's like there's so much information out there if you just listen, and it's a rarity when you get a kid who is good at it and will actually, optimize those opportunities and utilize those opportunities to learn something because they close their mouth for a few extra minutes.
Well, right? And also, look, part of that is I wasn't always a good listener. I have ADHD for one, which means that if something doesn't interest me within the first 2 to 3 minutes, I'm looking around for a way
out. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's a thing. It's me. It exists. And that's what it is. So listening for me was part of me being mentored by other very supportive leaders that were like, Goldman, I've never met anybody that can close deals like you, but holy shit, your head is thick. You cannot listen. Did you hear what he said? This, that, and the other thing. And that was early on in my 20s. Right. And I was like, yeah, he's right. I'm more charging on, but in business, especially in sales, if you are presenting an awesome solution and then you just sit back and listen, the person on the other side is going to tell you everything you need to know to give them the best solution, finalize this thing, and make them a great partner and hopefully recurring business partner in some capacity. So.
Absolutely. No, and I think that segues into kind of the direction I want to go to next, Justin, in terms of your story, and being a unique one, was something you and I discussed in our initial call, dropping out of high school, no GED, Now you're, as you said, you're a director in boardrooms.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, man, can you take us back to the early days and what you just kind of touched on it a little bit, like something as simple as learning how to listen.
Yeah.
What led you to where you are today? Where did we start? What did that look like? And now, like you said, sitting in boardrooms, no business being there by all right, but yet you still are.
Yeah.
How do we get here?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is to anybody listening to this that also dropped out of high school and has high business aspirations, my name is Justin Goldman. I'm an average human that came from a regular suburban, just outside of Philadelphia family, and you can feel very vulnerable to talk about this in the sense of opening with I dropped out of high school, because a lot of people will judge you, especially in business. But as far as me, I've outworked them all. Anybody that's ever been on that platform. But this message to those people is it's okay to feel vulnerable. And it's also okay to drop out of high school and chase whatever it is you want to chase, if you've got that hunger and that fire. So just wanted to put that out there so that everybody knows where I stand with that. Taking me way back. So when growing up in just outside the city of Philly in Delaware County, Drexel Hill specifically, Delco for those who live there. My father, full-time musician that also had a job in the insurance adjusting software side of the world, which is kind of a niche thing. My grandfather was in the insurance business, taught my father the business. So on the weekends, most weekends early on in my later elementary school days and early middle school days, I was, not skateboarding and stuff with my friends on the weekend. I was roadieing for my dad. So we were doing weddings and bar mitzvahs and the stuff that makes money. Mayor Ed Rendell's house is a place that, we played. He did a lot of the political guys and figures like that would have my dad's band play their parties. My job was to carry everybody's stuff in, set up the drums, at times do sound check for my dad. I sing too, not on this podcast, but
next one we'll do a musical podcast. We'll get a little performance.
Check 1, 2, make sure the mics are working. Maybe play a couple tunes with the band where my dad would get up and sing or play harmonica, just as a novelty thing, because I was little, and so you put me on the drums and it's like, oh, look at the little guy doing his thing. Or if my dad wanted to eat, there were 2 songs he knew I knew how to play on drums. Brown Eyed Girl was one of them I'll never forget. And I forget what the other one was. But regardless, that was my introduction to work. I didn't get paid, but I got to absorb the experience of work, because I also, I had to be somewhere for an allocated amount of time to get a job done, and then we go, right?
Yeah, you had to be on time. You had responsibilities. They needed you to show up.
That was the early one. Yeah, that was the early on. And I said, Dad, this is cool, but there's got to be something else for me to do. I'd like to make some money. I want to buy a drum set. I wanted things for myself at the age of 11 or 12, right? And I knew that my parents couldn't buy me everything. They were just regular working / middle class people. So my dad's like, well, what about a paper route? Be a paper boy. Now that thing, the closest thing I knew about being a paper boy was playing the video game on Nintendo. And that video game was pretty wild. A lot of things happened in that game. So I was like, okay, what's that like?
Yeah.
And didn't take much convincing. I think it was more like he told me I was going to be a paper boy. So I was a paper boy. And what I did was my neighbor, Tommy, and I, we both split 2 paper routes. So we split the money. So we took 2 routes on. He would do the top of the hill. I would do the bottom of the hill. That's neighborhood talk, but that's what we did. And then we would both go collect the money. And that's the transactional piece. That's where I learned how to be a sales guy. So basically, back then, I was delivering a paper called The Intelligencer, which is still around. We would get the papers, we'd have to pay for them, and then we'd keep the profits. So you buy your papers up front, you keep your profits. You got to rubber band them and deliver them, and then you go collect your money, right? So whatever it was per week, let's say it's $5 a week back then. Sounds about right. Maybe a little more. And I'd go door to door, knocking on the door, asking for money. And you would not believe how many grown working professionals would stiff me. So I had to learn a few things: the power of negotiation,
Objection handling.
So if the objection was 2 weeks, I would come back with my dad, who would then shame them in front of me to the tune of, what, you don't have $10? You can afford this house? You can't pay this kid $10?
Hey, my kid, yeah. Give my kid his money.
Oh, man. I mean, the amount of like faces that would turn different colors when they saw him at the door with me was pretty funny. So anyway, so that's where I learned a little bit of my responsibility and accountability, which I did not display in school. But when it came to holding on to the money that would get me my next skateboard deck or my next drum set, I was very fiscally responsible, right? I didn't let that money go anywhere. I made my own lunch every day. Wasn't spending frivolously. Obviously a new Green Day record would come out. I'm going after that and everything. But like, I wasn't like doing stupid shit with my money. Everything had a goal, right? And my parents kept me close to my goals too, which was really cool. Like having cool parents that are working and like are relatable and relatably young. They had me when they were 22 years old. Like they got it too and would motivate me. Like, hey, Justin, if you ask for a tip, you're more likely to get one. And so
Worst I can do is say no.
Right.
Non-zero chance they say yes.
So I said, oh, okay. So I go up to the first house I go to collect from. They give me the $10. And I said, oh, my parents said that, you guys can tip too if you want. And they gave me another couple bucks. I thought it was funny. And that's how I learned. To me, that was the real sale at that point, was if I could get a tip. And so that's how I learned the whole, you have to ask for the sale sometimes. Okay, we ready to do this? Okay, you ready to give me $2 extra? Anyway, I digress. That was my first job. That's what got me into it.
Awesome. So something as simple as a paper route,
yeah,
and you've figured out a way. I mean, it's really a tremendous story of not necessarily overcoming adversity, but scrapping your way, the non-traditional route to a place that you wanted to end up either way.
Yeah. I mean, looking back on it, it was money for, things that I would be saving up for at that age and that were important to me at that time. But really looking back on it, those are your formative years. Those are the years where you kind of learn how to act and how to do certain things, how to be a friend, how to be reliable and accountable and so on. And it was interesting being a child asking adults to pay up, right? 11 years old, these people are towering over me. I mean, an 11-year-old looking at a 30-year-old. And I'm like, you owe me $10. Hey, you're 2 weeks past due. Hey, like that in itself was like, oh, you have to not be scared. You have to go knock on that door and someone's going to answer and you need to ask them to pay you. That was a great lesson to learn.
Well, and I'm sure there's no other 11-year-olds in the neighborhood who know how to run a business, understand what their costs are. Like, hey, we're buying X amount of newspapers for this amount. We need to turn this much profit. And then on top of all of that, you have to go and collect, knock on the door. It's like, hey, where's my money? You owe me for like 2 weeks worth of papers. It's like $10. You're 11. When I was 11, I definitely wasn't dealing with anything like that. I had no idea what profits were.
Yeah.
So, so I guess what I'm wondering now, Justin, is, given now we have a little bit more of an essence as to where you came from, how this all started, where you are now.
Mhm.
How are some of these early skills translating into stuff that you're doing today?
Well, I think one of the big things was, I got to rub shoulders when I entered the professional world. I hadn't necessarily, my big dream was to, be in a rock and roll band, traveling rock and roll band. I achieved that later on in life, but like back then, that's like all I wanted, right? Like that. And so I was working, hospitality gigs and things like that would cater to that lifestyle because I'd be playing gigs at night and so forth. Wasn't until I got into the mobility industry and started rubbing shoulders with my friend Danny Schneider, who's a really successful business person, and now I think just advises people on how to be successful. But Danny also fellow high school dropout. We dropped out the same week. One of us dropped out to play in punk and hardcore bands, and the other one dropped out to start his company, Main Street Cellular, which then became a wholesale company, and he sold it for a pretty penny, and then started a series of other businesses. But I rubbed shoulders with him early on, basically reported directly to him and learned a lot of that business stuff as far as relationship building and so on goes there. And he introduced me to that world. From that point, I'd watched a friend of mine start a company when he was 16 years old, right? Cut from the same branches as me. So I just went and did that in my early 20s because I thought if I start a company and I have complete control over it, which I didn't, I had a partner. That's a whole other ballgame. But if I have more control over this company, I'll get to chase my dreams more often because I'll be able to build this great vision, chase this vision, achieve it, and then in parallel, travel, play music, do those things because I'm empowered. I'm empowering me. And that worked. 10 years of that. 10 years of Cell Brothers, which was the name of the little company we had. A lot of fun. And then eventually KEH came calling, who I've also been 10 years. And all of the experiences leading up to where I'm at now, to me, how they've shaped me is more so who shaped me. I was always looking for mentorship and advice and would always go to the people that I saw as either the most successful in the business I was in, the life that I wanted for myself, or a family that I was very fond of, and so on. And these conversations, stories, and so on that I would gather from these individuals would really help shape my story. And going on business trips with other successful people like that and being able to just be a fly on the wall and do the most important thing, shut the fuck up. It was great. And let me tell you, that's a hard thing for me to do, as you can tell, right? But when you know what's on the line, when you know that you're about to see a free show and education, easy to do. Easy to do. I would not be where I'm at now without my dad, for sure, and my mom, who won, I think it was Central Florida's real estate salesperson of the year, like right before she passed away 5 years ago. And if anybody knows about Central Florida, real estate is abundant there.
Yes.
There's a
Central
lot
Florida,
of
especially.
if there is a field of swampland, there will be a new development on it like the next time you drive by. So unless it's protected land, which I don't know the rules there either. Yeah, I would say my mom. I would say my father, of course. So my parents, Danny Schneider, for damn sure, and still one of my absolute best friends. My buddy Jake Serlin, who's in the movie business. John Safran, former CEO of a company I work for now, who was Michael Dell's right hand man. I spent a lot of time with John. John was a CEO that really changed the game for me. Taught me a lot of things I already knew, but you ever work with somebody that teaches you something you already knew, but it's how they said it? You already knew it, but it's how they said it. Like, I'll give you an example. Communication. It's the most important tool in business, but it's also the most underutilized. Right? We know that. But how you define it is how you absorb it.
Like they give you, it's like setting the table or creating the environment. You already know it, but sometimes there's some resistance, or some hesitation, I should say. Like, is it really my place to speak? Should I voice this opinion? I know it, but I don't know if I'm going to actually say it, for example.
Right.
Your point about communicating, it's like, yeah, having a mentor that he's not necessarily telling you anything, but creates that environment or sets the table, if you will, for you to go and be your absolute best self as opposed to 70%, for example. Right?
Correct. And working for people like that makes me want to run through fucking walls for them. Right? Like, one of the things that they say about me, the company I'm with now, is they're like, I heard this from a new person that just came on. Because every time I leave for the company, when I just give you an idea, when I started at this company, I already said the name once. I'm not going to keep saying it. There was 83 employees, and that was in 2016. Now there's 300. So a rapid growth rate. I think we were at, well, I don't want to talk financials, but regardless, a lot of people. So every time I walk down the hallway after a trip, it's like somebody's looking at me like I got 3 heads. Like, who's this guy? Like, what? I've been here 10 years.
Yeah, what are you looking at? I've been here longer than you.
What do you do here? So yeah, definitely. Yeah, sorry. I think I went off on a tangent there. My mistake.
No, all good and all valuable stuff. But I do want to circle back to a couple of things you mentioned earlier, and something that you and I really wanted to make sure we agreed we wanted to discuss this in the chat today, in mentorship, and mentorship being clearly important to you.
Yeah.
And you, chief people person, if you will, in your current role, as you know, self-described, just because you're that guy, it's like open door, always come to me with whatever, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
But also, what qualities are you thinking make for an effective mentor leader? You're in a leadership position already.
Yep.
And I know how mentorship has shaped your career thus far, but how are you playing that mentor role for those who see you as a mentor these days? Because I know there's a large group of people who you help out in that capacity as well.
I forgive you. I do have 2 beagles that are howling at something right now. But
no problem. I can't even hear them. All good.
So, it's at work, mentorship, I think, is a little different than outside of work, right? There's some rules and things you gotta, stay within, to make, because it's a professional environment. However, I do recognize that not everybody, in some capacities, had the same amount of support that I did. Growing into my role, like my parents didn't disown me when I dropped out of high school to play in bands, right? Didn't like it. They weren't calling their friends being like, guess what Justin just did. But, well, maybe they were, only there's probably some F-bombs,
Yeah, it wasn't, they weren't as exciting as you are, right? Yeah.
Not
a ton of positivity.
Now my dad calls his friends and goes, guess what Justin just did? Anyway, funny. So I recognize the fact that, I'm so fortunate, and I've lived this like wild life. I feel like I've already lived 20 lives, and you get your best leadership capabilities and mentorship from your experiences, right? And the people that mentored you. So basically, for me, I do a couple different things. I meet with my team individually, every single guy and every person that works for me, we have at least an hour every week or bi-weekly or definitely more than once a month. As a team, we meet 3 times a week, full team, talking to each other, going over things, et cetera, keeping ourselves close to the goals. But then separately, when I get together with you, I've got 3 things on my agenda, right? I've got the first thing, which is your goals that we've set in the beginning of the year. Where are we at with them? What do you need from me? And a lot of people won't tell you what they need from you. So then if I don't hear anything from that ask, I start going, do you need this? Do you need that? Do you need, because I already have a list.
Yeah, you already know.
Because I've been there.
Yeah.
And I've done the struggle. And then the third thing is me always saying, we don't have to talk about it because you have to initiate it. But is there anything you want to talk about in your personal life? Anything I can help you with? That's when we start having the real conversation. Because you would not be on my team unless you were already an executor, already creative, and already a good person, a great fit for the team, right? I already know those things. And since we meet once a week, easily, we're close to the goals. But what I don't know is in this environment, in this especially toxic political environment and things, and social media environment and the stresses and anxieties and things that have risen to the top, it's hard out there. And not everybody gets asked, how you doing?
How's it going? It's so simple. I mean, and not to interrupt, but I'm really glad I've business leaders on here mostly, right? Almost every one of them, when I ask a similar question to what we're discussing now, is like just emphasis on knowing the people, knowing your team, literally just like you outlined just now. And I'm glad that this is a pattern because it means there are, a lot of good leaders out there, probably a lot of bad ones too, as you know. How's it going, man? Like not work related, like how's it going outside of work? And it's like,
I know
that creates such a better environment because we're spending a lot of time together.
I know
that out there.
Most of my team's kids. Okay. Their spouses, their pets. It's important to me. It is. Because I can't do anything without people. They're the most complex part of any business. And also the most powerful part of any business. You harness that properly and you do it, with integrity, ethics, and be genuine, just real. Oh my goodness. You'll have the best team.
Well, yeah, because it promotes a happier work environment, which directly translates to optimized productivity and efficiency. I mean, they're going to come to work motivated, in the mood to do their job because it's like going to work's not that bad. The people I surround myself with every day are really great. I really like my manager. I really like my director.
They care about me. They support me.
Right. They give a shit about me,
That's exactly
they actually care.
I'm the chief give a shit officer, and I'm not a chief officer of anything but if I am, it's of that. And look, I've had a lot of bosses that sucked, right, over the years, and we all remember them. And when you take the time to remember that, especially new leaders listening, if you take the time to remember your bad leaders, you will lead great.
By just avoiding all the nonsense that you remember and that you dealt with. I mean, would you say that's like the biggest piece of advice you would give someone in a leadership position looking to improve their mentorship skills? Say, someone who's relatively green gets put into a leadership position, wants to be a good leader, wants to be a mentor, but doesn't necessarily know how.
Sure. I would say this. I would say that I already said the 2 things that I think are the most important.
Yeah.
and that is communication and people. And as a new leader, the one thing that you want to communicate to your team is that you believe in them and that you want them to believe in you. So at the end of every meeting that I have with my team, I say, what else can I, like, anything more I can do for you guys? What am I not doing? Have some humility. Because the bosses that I worked for that were arrogant and boisterously stuck their chest out all the time and, you know, really spent most of their time talking about them or whatever, I left them all.
Why would you say? Why would you say? People quit jobs because of their direct managers, not because of the job, typically, I feel
it was
like.
strange, it was almost as though a lot of these people feared talent. Like a particular company I worked for at one point, I got brought on, and I got brought on by that CEO who then said to said VP that I was going to work for, this is Justin. He's going to knock down walls for you, and what's on the other side is what we're looking for, so we're going to get him set up nice, relocate him, all this stuff. And from the moment I met this person who was there since the founding of the company, I could tell it wasn't going to be a supportive situation. It was going to be how do I get this northern guy out of my business and away from me because he's probably here to take my job and all this stuff. And, that vibe was so strong that I came out and asked. Like, I was like, hey, man, do you even want me here? I remember I was going to leave town to close this big deal for this company. Huge. And right before I left, like the night before, stops me in the hallway. I was gathering my stuff that I needed for the trip. And he goes, I don't know why you're going. Like, this isn't going to work out. That was the motivating message that was given to me before I had to go basically to the middle of nowhere and do a job that would normally take probably 5 people as one human and be resourceful and employ people on the fly. I had to wrap pallets and do all these different things, and I didn't have a team. So long story short, that guy motivated me, and the deal ended up being the largest deal in company history for that company, and then I left right afterwards.
Sometimes you got to have the tough conversations, man. The writing's on the wall, and go close that out, and you move on. I mean, it's just not like it's going to get better after you close the deal,
Yeah, what was the point? What's the point of benefiting someone that, isn't invested in you to begin with?
Especially if you're succeed. I mean, it's like I said, it probably would have just gotten worse.
Sure.
Right? Especially after a huge win for you directly. It's like some people just aren't meant to lead and they can't get over there. It's like an ego thing. Like you said, have some humility. Those are the best leaders because you get the best responses. You create these employees and set this culture up. Yeah, Justin wants to literally, I think he would literally run through a wall for me. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. All I did was listen and create a culture that allows him to be his best self, and that's it. And the guy's ready to do whatever I need him to do to be successful together.
Yeah, it was. I heard that this guy stops me in the hallway and he goes, "Oh man, I was just talking to your CEO. He said you're the guy that gets on a plane at the drop of a hat to go do the thing if it needs to get done." And I said, "Yes, to a point. I don't necessarily want that reputation because I also value my work-life balance. But if you're telling me that you need me to do the thing, I consider that an honor. Like, that's awesome. A company of our size says, I need Justin to go do this thing. That is so flattering to me. Maybe it is because I'm a dropout or whatever. And I still think about that, when I'm doing certain things like, oh my gosh, like I went from this to this is nuts. But,
right.
I don't think it really matters what motivates you to be successful. So as long as there is motivation.
Exactly, man. Exactly. And last question here before I let you go. And we've touched a lot on this, but want to circle back to this one more time, just because we've had a lot of momentum with this one, starting with Saquon and the leadership element.
Yeah,
Looking back at your career, and there's still plenty of career left for you, obviously.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Me too, man. But what is one lesson about leadership and people that you think everyone should know, especially those looking to grow themselves within their business journey? You've given us a lot of value today. We've talked a lot about mentorship, people, communication, but we started with the Saquon example. What about for you personally? Looking back at your career, what's one main lesson about the leadership and the people that everyone should know who are aspiring to be a Justin Goldman-esque person and beyond?
Well, hopefully beyond, right? I don't think, I'm a deep thinker, right? So I know that my ADHD brain right now is searching for some crazy one-line thing that, will break the internet. But that's not the case, because if you overthink how valuable people are, then you'll probably miss the point. I think that, and I'll repeat this again, the best advice I can give is your people are your everything. Okay. And then there's the company, because the company doesn't come before the people, because the people make the company, right? They make the wheels spin. And it's really embracing your humans, being on the same plane as them, knowing, trusting, and supporting. And I feel as though when a team and a leader embodies those things, and then they unify as a team that knows, trusts, supports, and most of the time likes each other, go to Topgolf or whatever after work. I think that is a recipe for success in any business. Any business. I don't care if it's e-commerce, re-commerce, apparel, the music business, obviously private equity, which is the sector that I'm in now. Like, the people are everything. And the best companies out there, especially the best companies, what do they boast about when you're touring their facilities, when you go to Google or when you go to one of the other campuses like REI or something like that? They're boasting, or Leica's campus, or even Canon. They're boasting about what they do for their people.
Right.
I love that.
Makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference at the end of the day.
Can make an entire company is what it can do.
Especially today, when people looking for jobs are more interested. I mean, obviously 50 years ago, it wasn't the same conversation in interviews.
We
but
couldn't
now
have
it's like
this conversation 50 years ago, because if the CEO would have seen this interview 50 years ago, would have never gotten the job.
Yeah. There's no culture wasn't a thing. It's like show up to work, show up on time, do your job, you're lucky to be here. Period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Justin, I couldn't agree more. And I want to thank you for these insights and from, coming from a vulnerable place and sharing some of your experiences with us from start to finish. Congrats on all your success. Good luck to you in the future. I really, really enjoyed this one. Looking forward to getting it posted, but thanks again for everything, man. This was fantastic. And maybe, in about a year or so, we'll have you back on the pod. We'll check in, see what trends are coming up next, and we'll see how we're doing then.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'd like to, a year from now. That sounds good.
Fantastic. Good luck to you, and thanks again, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.